And now you got young artists who are voluntarily making bullshit purposely to try to game this system.
But is that more about the consumer, though?
And I say that respectfully.
You're saying that as somebody who streams, though.
Just real quick, Erinn, I got love for you. I'm going to say this, though. For you, it's producer time.
That's why I want to make the producer beat video. So this is kind of the pilot program for that. What's going down, everyone, is the podcast that has many names now. There were a couple that I liked. Till further notice, at odds. There were some new suggestions. So what I don't want people to do is stop giving us suggestions in the comments. There are some great ones.
EP&D was pretty good.
Yo, that was one of my favorites, actually. EP&D, that was dope. With the logo and everything.
Awesome. Yeah, that was pretty good.
That means my name's at the front now. Wow.
It has
started last, but made it to the front.
It's the tradition. You moved up. You're a name partner now.
But before we get started, gotta let people know that this episode is brought to you by Two Lost, the most advanced, the technologically advanced music distributor out there. You know, a lot of people, because we distribute to over 450 stores, a lot of artists find when they move their catalog over that they notice a bump in sales just because we're distributing to more stores. But we got a hell of a lot more features. Log in, check it out. Use the promo code PAIN, PAIN. Don't have to pay anything for 3 months, so you can log in, check it out, see all the features, and see if it's the right distributor for you.
And it's $2.99 after that, so it's not that we're trapping you in something that's going to run up your entire budget.
Yeah, and also I didn't mention this before we jumped on. I got to start out kind of on a sad note because the music industry lost somebody, a super special person, Rosalind. I always butcher her last name. It's Covarrubias. I don't know if any of you guys knew her, but she's just one of those people in the music industry that is not like the stereotype, like super positive, always willing to help people. I met her back in the Funk Volume days. I think she started off doing music stuff for MySpace, like in the early days of MySpace. And then when MySpace tried to have a resurgence, I know that's when we kind of did some stuff with her with Funk Volume, but I've maintained a relationship. You know, it's just one of those people that you don't have to see all the time, but you know that they're super genuine, always willing to help, just super positive. So it was a super shock that we lost her. Don't know how she passed. But definitely wanted to shout her out because, you know, she was definitely one of the real ones in the music industry, helped a lot of people out, especially in the Filipino community. I know, and
not obscure either. She was 30 Under 30 with Daniel Ek in Billboard magazine back in 2009. So this was a while ago, and this was big. And yeah, she was the MySpace executive, I believe.
Yeah, I know she had a great relationship with Guap, a great relationship with Saweetie, and a lot of the other Filipino artists. So yeah, just want to make sure to shout her out before we started this episode. But now we can jump into less important stuff.
Well, what's most important is Curtis King's lighting and framing. And now that you put us all side.
I'm not gonna lie to you, it's bothering me right now that I'm so far at the bottom and I see the space above my head because I've been learning about composition. It's bothering me, but it's cool.
Well, yeah, rule of thirds gets me all the time because then I want to slouch or not slouch, and then I'm uncomfortable and I got to move my camera mid podcast. But we got the Brady Bunch intro screen squares up, and you can just kind of see the contrast in lighting and quality. And I have a cat hotel happening at my house, so you might see some weird activity in the background. I'm just anticipating the comments. Anyway, all four of us, well, really all three of us, let's take Curtis King out of it, have mixed opinions. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree quite a bit on just the streaming model in general. But we've been...
Wait, do you want to give Curtis King his intro?
Yeah, I'm about to.
People may not be familiar.
Oh, if people aren't familiar with Curtis King, just stop watching this video. We've
retention just went down the drain with that one.
I think it. People don't like admitting that they don't know who someone they should know is. So
it's true.
I don't think that's going to hurt my retention. But we've been disagreeing about the recent changes to streaming, not just Spotify but Deezer as well, and this conversation is not just an extension of that, but it's a conversation with somebody who took his disagreement with philosophy, with Spotify's new models, and I think streaming in general, just the way revenue's generated with streaming, and has pretty much become, and I use the term lightly, a martyr for that philosophy. So his name is Curtis King. I know him as a producer, but I've recently seen vintage photos of Curtis King. He's been rapping for a while. He kind of does everything. And if you don't know who he is, I feel like our channels have basically just been running in parallel for the last decade plus. So you should know. I've been on his channel. He's been on my channel. Curtis King, we appreciate you for being on today's episode.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate Dame being the one specifically to invite me to this cage match. I don't think I've ever been invited. Yes, I have. There was one other time, and a guy popped up with an oven glove. That somebody challenged me to a conversation on that note. But I say thank you for even entertaining it, because I don't look at myself as a martyr at all in this. I look at myself as someone who got tired of complaining about the same thing and doing nothing about it. And so when I'm making these moves, not once have you seen me say, hey, you artist, hey, you producer, take your music down. These are grown men and grown women. They know what decisions they need to make for themselves. This has been something that has been on my mind since the stream model was first introduced. And I was just too scared to do anything about it until my 38th year. And in having really a renaissance of my own in my art, where I said, I'm not making art at the highest level possible because I'm too concerned about these vanity statistics and metrics and things that weren't even a factor when I started. And now it's changing the way that I have made music and my dedication to music. I took it off, and I'm telling you, some of the most genius minds that I know in independence and just marketing in general. Shout out my former manager, Salas. Shout out LaRussell, who fell off on the bench damn near when I told him I took my music off. It's not like I haven't thought this through. It's not like I haven't talked to people, like I said, who are not some of the brightest minds. Dame's another one who, we came up studying what you did with Funk Value. That was a case study for the independent label I was on called Black Cloud. You were a case study. I remember seeing the video on the documentary of the Halloween show where it wasn't packed out, and you guys found a way to turn that into packed out shows. We were trying to study that. So I think when some people look at it, I'm not saying you in particular, Dame, I think when some look at me, they have their own biases about artists, and they think just another dumb nigga making waves. That's all it is. But it's not that with me.
Yeah. So this episode basically, I reached out to you because more recently, obviously you took your music off of Spotify, but you have a lot of content kind of, I don't know, bashing's the right word. You can rephrase it or just kind of give your stance on streaming. My stance on streaming is like, I see a ton of benefits when it comes to streaming. It's not a perfect system at all. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but I've seen a lot of the positives that come from it. So when I see somebody say, or just constantly saying negative things about stream, like, okay, we have to recalibrate and talk about some of the positives as well, because I think they're being missed in the dialogue, missed in the content. And before we even jump even further into this, you can say what your stance is, but I know you have a project coming out. Is the more content that you're putting out, is it to push towards, is the bashing of streaming marketing for the album?
Yes.
Gotcha.
It is. Let me say this. It is not solely for that, but it did turn into a conversation that said, these are the people in the demographic that I'm going to be trying to reach through ads anyways. These are the human beings who I'm going to go direct to consumer. It is just talking about streaming is bringing out from the woodworks the people that I didn't know were already sitting there that weren't my own fans, who love albums, who love physical product, who love all these things. So when you think about a Curtis King, I'm not somebody who thinks marketing first. I'm somebody who thinks art and creative first. That's always been my model from the beginning of my channel. It's always creativity first. But I am I'm a marketing savant of sorts. And it is not that I'm anti-streaming. I listen to streaming every single day as a consumer. It is amazing as a consumer, right? Even yesterday, I'm shooting visuals for a project not going up on streaming using Apple Music as the mode because of its functionality with my iPhone. So as a consumer, I completely understand why somebody wouldn't want to move away from there. But at the same time, I, as an artist, have to see where I'm disconnected. And then I have to start really asking administrative and business questions that may require some sacrificing along the way, some very scary decisions. But look at what it's making me focus on. It's by taking my music, not just off of Spotify. That was the initial thing. The threshold thing pissed me off. But then as I started to talk to LaRussell, as I started to kind of do my own research about the predicament that Spotify is in, I started to feel bad for them to a certain degree, right? I'm not sure if I should have went to that extreme, but that's how I felt. So I said, I was going to move away from Spotify. Then it became better than bad is not good. So people made arguments for Tidal. Shout out to Tidal for finding a better micropayment system. Better than bad for me is not good. And if I'm still here and I'm talking this DIY talk and I'm talking all this stuff about how we should be establishing ourselves as small businesses, I feel like in a lot of ways it's a death by 1,000 cuts through our lack of focus because of the things we're concerned about. If I got to hear another artist, because I do consultations, tell me about how a nerdy ass playlister that never put their fingers to keys is now the new gatekeeper because 70, I believe that the number is 70, don't quote me on it, 70 to 75% of streams in general that are generated on these streaming websites, specifically on Spotify, are through playlist. That bothers me. It feels like gatekeeping. It feels like the 90s when folks were getting demo CDs and trying to get signed. That's what it feels like for me. And I know I can be a bit extreme, but when I see it from that perspective, and then I start to think about the project that I want to release, I see the project that I do, call it arrogant or not, as fine art. The fact that I would be in a situation in which I would make this fine art that I believe belongs behind the museum ropes, and then also go down to Burlington and say, you can have it too. Like that, something about that just doesn't sit right with me. And so these are the decisions that I've been making.
So that number I don't think is correct, right? So that number, and if that number is correct, it's including all playlists, right? So that's user-generated playlists, and I would say primarily user-generated playlists.
Okay.
Like the catalog, even when I ran Funk Volume, like most of our streams came from either direct users or user-generated playlists. So that 70%, that was one of the tweets I saw. I was like, that's a little misleading because it's insinuating that Spotify has control over this 70% of streams that happens on the platform. And that's completely, and I know that's maybe a minor point in the overall conversation, but it is important that I think we get at least the facts right. And
can I say one thing about that though?
Yeah.
What led me to that mode of thinking is the fact that their profit that they bring in is already 70% accounted for from the oligarch, right? The Sony Music, the Warner Music, the what's the other one? Sony, Warner, and Universal. They account for 70% of their income. And so when I think about somebody who is taking 70% and you're taking 30% home for your overhead, you're taking 30% home to divide amongst a pie. If I'm thinking about that, and we're not just talking about folks who are signed, we're talking about even if you're an independent artist, there could be someone who listens to your music and say they account for 500 listens or $10, whatever it is. You're only getting $2 to $3 of that $10, even if they listen to just your music, because of the pie system specifically in Spotify. So when I look at that, when I look at just a zoomed out point of view of it, I have to think, well, the person that controls 70% of your money, the majority of the catalog that is generating you streams, why would they not have influence upon what has priority to get streaming? That's me, foil brain conspiracy theorist, but that's my mode of thinking when I say these things. It's not meant, I feel like the numbers are so skewed. I don't have to go on a smear campaign. Like the infrastructure itself bothers me.
Yeah. No, I mean, they definitely have a lot of influence. I mean, I'm not denying that. And I know in your video, you kind of 8 miled this argument because you were going to say, oh, I consider myself a thought leader in the space. And I do say, well, how come all these other artists are winning from streaming? I know more artists that are winning today than I've ever known in my history of working with artists. I work at a music distribution company. Sure. We pay out over $5 million every single month, right? I'm seeing finance. That's what really made me think like, okay, I'm seeing finance companies jump into the space. Mm-hmm. Finance companies don't jump into spaces where there's no money, right? So we have a partnership with BeatBread, and we're constantly giving advances to people that have figured out streaming and have been able to build community and to get. So I'm seeing all of these things, and I still have some ownership in some of the catalog from Funk Volume that hasn't been relevant in years, and that's still making money. So when I'm actually receiving funds from it, when I'm talking to artists every day that have figured this out, I just had a conversation with Nick D, completely independent. Now he's going to be the top of the top for sure, but he started from nothing. He started from 0 followers in 2019. And now he has 3.5, sometimes 4 million monthly listeners on Spotify, making a shitload of money from streaming. And he'll tell you streaming is his primary revenue stream. So I'm sometimes forced into these conversations where it makes it seem like, oh, Dame's just, the leading the charge for streaming because he's a business guy or something like that. I don't want to have this conversation. I just want to tip the conversation back so that we don't discourage some artists that can figure this shit out. Because I think, to be honest with you, the ones that get discouraged the most are probably artists of color, like, Black and brown artists. Sure. They're the ones that probably more hear the stuff on our platforms, right? They're the ones that got lost in TikTok. Like they got left behind in the TikTok era because it wasn't cool. Mm-hmm. Because they didn't jump on what was going to benefit them, and that window of opportunity on these platforms doesn't stay open long, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's just important to get the right education out there. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy, but I've been in this shit since 2008, and I'm seeing more artists winning today than I've ever seen. It's not a perfect system, but neither was downloads, right?
Dan, can I ask you a question specifically about what you just said? I do believe that there are a lot of artists winning in the streaming era because you are always pointing me to outliers, which is what I consider them. I sit kind of squarely between you and Curtis, as you know. I think that music is a lost leader and streaming is a part of that mechanism. But I do think that there are people who are winning. Do you find that in this group of outliers that you consistently see, are there a lot of Black and brown artists in that 3 million, 4 million, even 1 million monthly listeners? Or is it not? Does it look like the rest of the music industry?
No, there are a lot in that area. I mean, Nick is he's at top of the top, but to win in music, you're an outlier, whether you're in 2023 or 2010 or 1999. Curtis, you've been in this for a minute. Like, I'm sure you saw homies come and go, no matter what era, whether it was cats that refused to slang CDs out the trunk or, people that couldn't do well in the iTunes era or Napster era, whatever. Like, I
mean, for sure. I just think realistically, though, we're still teaching to the middle. I don't necessarily fully agree with it, but we can't look at outliers in an outlier economy and say, oh, well, they're doing it, therefore it's possible. Like, of course it's possible, but I think even if I look at the creators I represent and have represented, most of them sit between 250,000 monthly listeners and 1 million monthly listeners. Like, that's where they sit. So it's like, I feel like that's who we're talking to the most. I only represent Black creators. So I'm not like coming against this because I think there's value, but I do feel like where Curtis is sitting is he's teaching to the middle, again, people who have a couple 100,000 monthly listeners. And it's like,
Even less
is
than
this worth the effort? Or maybe it's 50,000 monthly listeners to whatever. You know, I think about somebody like Linnell Grant, who was able to make like exponentially more on a platform. And this is not me going into the direct to consumer conversation verse, because I do think that there's a value in streaming. Again, I sit squarely between the two of you, I think, but there are lots of
people. My bad, Erinn, but you had so Curtis and I aren't I'm not here and Curtis is not if this is gung ho streaming, I'm here. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I'm not I'm forced to cape for streaming because of the things that I hear versus the things that I experience. So
can I add this to it? Because Dame, I feel the same way. I cannot think someone who is a part of one of the most important independent labels doesn't care about independent artists. That does not sit in my head. That doesn't even make sense to me. So that's not what I'm coming here with. What I will say is this, though. I do wonder, with all the success that you're around, if there's what I call proximity bias. Because you see so many successful stories, can it possibly skew what the entire viewpoint of it is? When I do spend a lot of time with artists that you may not think are worth your time. And I'm not saying, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I spend a lot of time with artists that you may not feel like are worth your time. I spend time with artists that end up becoming DJ Payne customers. You know, I spend time with these artists and I really ask them, what is your budget? And you know what I can tell you for today's rapper? There are so many effing leeches from every corner that you can think of that want their studio money, that want their graphic design money, but they're using Canva for the templates, that sit up here and take advantage of their splits or take advantage of their administrative stuff they don't know anything about. Right? They resell exclusive beats, and there's things that happen to these rappers, not to paint them as victims, but they're already in a situation where they're starting in the red. To have them come to another space where they probably don't have the resources. I think that streaming can be very valuable to people who have a team to delegate responsibilities to. I think that at some point, though, you got to figure out how to sell. And I feel like two things have happened because of streaming that I can never let go. As much as I understand and I use streaming, two things I can never let go. The devaluing of music, right? We can blame Napster, but the decision was made to pivot this direction, and I never agreed with it. I don't know how many artists were in the room when that conversation had, but I never agreed with that direction. The second thing about this is that these people who are winning have people that they can delegate responsibilities off to and allow for omnipresence, but they learn how to sell first. Because LaRussell has the ability to do an offer-based service, because he's a personable human being who can get out there in the streets and talk to someone, and that be the reason they buy merchandise, cool. A lot of these folks who are winning in streaming have never, it seems like they never walked outside and touched grass, because you get them out in front of a show, they're not selling out. You get them out in front of a merch booth, they don't know what to do with their hands like Ricky Bobby. And I'm just looking at it and I'm like, it is to me in a way promoting laziness, but shielding it with we're making a whole lot of money. And when I look at that, I'm like, damn, your ability to sell and your ability to push something physical is your livelihood as an independent artist. If you don't develop those skills because you have daddy streaming to rely upon, why would you ever need to develop them? So this is where I'm coming from when I'm like, it's not about being anti it. It's about figure this into your business out so that you can get the proper funds, the cash flow to delegate and then move over there and be omnipresent. Gary Vee gives the same advice. People always talk about him and his abundance of content. There's a video, really well unknown video that sits on his channel that says, you don't need omnipresence in the beginning, my friend. He says you need cash flow. When you get cash flow, then you can start to get the people in place that can give you omnipresence. To me, that's what streaming represents. Be on streaming once you already figured out, I can move this physical something, not even just CDs, vinyl CDs. I got USB cards. I got a book now. I got T-shirts. I got all kind of different things because I know how to sell. Murs took me out on tour, taught me how to sell to these music consumers. That is something that has been the reason I can do this for 20 plus years.
So you said a lot. So
I know that's my bad, but I just
I'm going to try to. So again, you said I might have some proximity bias, right?
Sure.
So here's the thing. Like I said a few minutes ago, this industry was never designed for a majority of people to win. But I have a proximity to a lot of people that are winning. So there is a possibility for even the artists that you say are not worth my time to step into that lane. And there's no, you learn how to sell, but there's no reason why you can't learn how these algorithms work, learn how to be consistent, learn how to excel in this space as well. Why not do it all, right? Why not window? Why not, if you're building community at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do. You can window your music and just have it available, sell it direct to fans. I mean, it's the same thing that I do with Big Ja. I work with, we do his web series. We go direct to fans first, right? Sell it direct to fans. Then we put it on YouTube and Facebook, get that bread. No, actually, before that, we have a sponsor. So we get a sponsor, we direct to fans, YouTube, Facebook, and now Tubi is a great platform. There's no reason to go one way or the other. In my opinion, you can do it all. And these artists that are winning, you're making the assumption that they have a shitload of resources. A lot of these cats are just in their room making music, right? And they may not have the ability to sell hand to hand that you learn. And that's something that they need to learn. But I feel like the people that have that skill set need to understand how these algorithms work and how the Spotify's work if they want to play in that space.
Right. This is my only point of emphasis on that is that the people who have won without those resources have leaned all the way in on this streaming, have leaned all the way in on learning the algorithms, and they have done well. Good for them. If you take away streaming, what do you have the ability to do?
Why does it matter? Like, I don't understand.
It matters because when I look at certain situations that may be outliers, R. Kelly and Triple X Tentacion, having the ability to remove their music from streaming, having the ability now where I'm seeing people getting messages about fraudulent streaming and they have no idea where that's coming from. And now they can't even push the music that they want for the money that they're not going to make annually. I look at that and I'm like, if you, for some reason, have your funds strapped in this environment, even though you've given it your all, what you've done is two things. One, you've spreaded your resources way too thinly because you don't have the infrastructure or the system to be omnipresent or even be successful in both spaces. That's why you see people who are sitting in one and like a one-trick pony, because to be successful in both, you cannot just do that by yourself long term. You can do it short term and find some ways to do it and finesse it. But in terms of building an actual business, you know this, Dame. Like you have built some successful business and you continue to do that. That is your tradition. But when I look at these artists, they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the focus. They're still focused about the art. They're making art number one. And when I look at that, I'm like, fam, if you make them, if you have them spread their focus so thinly between the two, they're like a bike that sits on its side. You can ride it as fast as you want. You're not going nowhere.
Yeah, I just may be missing the point. Like, I don't understand because, I don't see why independent artists that is doing well streaming, that's giving them the income, hopefully giving them some time to build out these other things.
My thing is this, they don't own the streaming. They don't own the streaming.
That's true.
It's not their digital real estate. So when I look at someone who is so successful in somebody else's house, that makes me sit back and say, that can be taken away from you. The same thing as my YouTube channel. I learned that firsthand when my YouTube channel got hacked this year. It really opened my eyes to like, damn, I'm putting so much of my time and investment into this space. And literally somebody sending an email to me and just opening up a file could take it all away.
Yeah.
Moment for me was so important because now when I look at these artists who have leaned all the way on in streaming, when you see a threshold rule, regardless of how you feel about it, it reminds you, hello, you're not in your own space. You're not in your own house. When I think about these artists who are successful in streaming, I need to ask, are you using some of that money to build up a website? And unfortunately, when I see so many of these artists that have the $100,000 coming every month from streaming, they don't even see a necessity to start to do any kind of physical merch or even learn any kind of buying. I'm brushing with broad strokes right now, obviously.
Right.
When I see this, I'm like, selling is so important. Selling is so much more important than what you can do in any streaming system, in my opinion. Selling is how you get your wife to say yes when you propose. Selling is how selling is how I was able to get around the US on $0 on a tour with Murs. That is the ability I had to learn. Selling is the reason why selling beats put me in a position where being in the industry, one last point, being in the industry all of these years didn't allow for me to get my funds at a reasonable time. I had to learn, how do I get my money right now, with the exception of PayPal fees and things like that. When I figured that out, I started to realize that's where I feel more independent and more in control, not being dependent upon somebody else's platform that can boot me off or change their rules at any point in time.
I don't think anybody on here will disagree with that. I agree with the skill set of selling being extremely important. Like, nobody's disagreeing. And as you know, like, I'm not saying that you should lean just into streaming, right? We want to own data. We want to own emails and phone numbers. We want to own that direct connection with our fan. I'm just saying all I'm saying is streaming is much more, or can be much more lucrative than people believe sometimes on the internet when they hear certain dialogue that's happening. What you just said about, people that lean all the way into streaming and forget about these other things. I'll say the same thing about people that sign to labels and forget about building their own community, right? So it's not a streaming thing. To me, that's a lack of business knowledge or a lack of a team. So that has nothing to do with streaming. That's just, if you listen to the MEC and the things that we talk about on a weekly basis, we're talking about holistically, like building businesses, building community. We would never say, oh, just do streaming. Right. Matter of fact, there's a cat right now that, got up to about 1 million monthly listeners, and he's become a good friend of mine. And I'm trying to encourage him, like, the importance of, having more of a presence on social, because he doesn't even really have that much of a presence on social. He's probably got like 10,000 followers, something like that, but he's got 1 million monthly listeners. So to me, the other piece, in addition to putting money right into your pocket, like, streaming is a great, like, top of funnel where people are finding out about you. I just took my mom to a concert. She's in love with this cat named Young Chris. He's a Christian R&B artist. And as I was driving her to the show, I was like, Ma, because I never even asked her, I was like, Ma, how you even find out about this cat? She's like, I don't know. He just came up on my Spotify. Then I started listening to it. And now she's physically impaired. She doesn't get out that much. Right. So for her to want to go to a show just because she randomly heard this cat on Spotify and fell in love with his music, like, that can happen all the time, and that's, again, how you start building community. So yeah, a lot of what you're saying, I agree. Like, a lot of, I don't want to get anybody who's watching this, I don't want you to get this twisted. When I speak passionately about it, this is not passionately towards Dame. This is me thinking about a system that, at some degree, we all have serve product to, or we have businesses related to it. Even when I do a consultation, somebody is probably making money off of streaming as one of their streams of revenue to come talk to me. So I'm not anti-streaming. What I am is pro-independence and pro-creativity. And the thing that I really want to zoom out at, because I think that's awesome that there was a system in place on Spotify to expose an artist to your moms. I think that's amazing, right? As a consumer, I think it's one of the greatest things. But when I think about the way that we view art, and the way that I even like looking at this Vlad TV tweet where he's talking about, Andre 3000 only did this amount of streams, and he's so brave, and and I'm like, is that the measurement of is that the measurement of, and I don't want to put any words and say that Andre created high art, but I definitely think that he pushed the needle. But then I look at these conversations and I'm like, damn, music has been so devalued in one direction, in my opinion. I'm not going to blame streaming all the way for it. I think that's a good chunk of why the psyche of it is like that. Even when I speak independence, speak about this, like being off of streaming, I get comments every day on my YouTube of somebody that's like, I'm going to download it for free anyways. I'm like, congratulations, you're a bum in public. That's great. But I look at this and I'm like, a friend of mine, Stevie, asked a question, and it has been ruminating in my head for months. He's an amazing artist named Stevie Crooks. And he said, bro, on some random stuff, if Basquiat, one of the greatest artists of all time, lived in his time, what do you think his place would be? Where would he be at?
Do you think he'd be on social media? Do you think that he would be signed to a deal in which they're asking him to water down his art form in the name of making the most money possible? And would we have been exposed to his greatest works? That's the place that I'm coming from ultimately, is that when I look at music, I realize like I've had a film over my eye. I've had blockage over my eye because I'm so concerned about streams. I'm so concerned about getting playlists. I'm so concerned about editorial banners on Apple Music. I'm so concerned about iTunes hip hop charts, which, by the way, for anybody who's like, you're just mad because you haven't done anything. First of all, 2 projects I've done have gone number 3. And then last year I had one that went number 1 on the hip hop iTunes charts. Why? Because I knew how to sell. I knew how to bundle up a package that went along with the pre-order that allowed people to purchase my project so many times it was number 1 on the hip hop iTunes charts. I am not anti, especially when them checks come, and especially the fact that I've been an ambassador for DistroKid. I've made more money as an ambassador than I've made as an artist with DistroKid, right? So for me to be anti is like, damn, bro. So then are you selling out by working with them? It's like, no, that's not the case. The case is that I understand their role in this situation, but I understand that we all grow too. And I'm in a place now where I'm like, as a creative, if Basquiat was here, I would hate for Basquiat to listen. And I'm not talking about you guys, but one of these head ass gurus online telling him how the reason why your art's not being appreciated is because you need to do. And it's like, bro, let him cook. Let these people be at the highest level of their art. But I feel like there's so many things that people are funneling into these artists' ears about, oh, do this, that are making them subconsciously devalue the very work that they're putting in. That's just the place that I'm coming from. And when I started to realize like, oh shit, this has been in my mind for a long time. I didn't realize it. It felt like freedom. So that's what this project is. This project is the first sign of freedom after letting go of these platforms and just the hold. And that's a personal issue, the hold that they've had on my psyche, because it wasn't about the music as much as it should have been.
I think if you look at somebody like Basquiat, though, like at the time, the currency, the social currency was partying. And he was making party flyers and partying with the biggest and brightest, and you know what I'm saying? So it's like he was in front of the tastemakers. So he was in the internet, whatever the version of that was. Okay. But then you also can look at people like Van Gogh, who died broke. And later, after his art was discovered, and then it became. So I think it's a hard argument to push that way. And then even Basquiat, the way I can't speak to his financial situation, but it's assumed that he didn't die with very much money. So are we talking about art for the sake of art or art in commerce? You're talking about making money from your art. And that's a very different thing than the art being valued for like its existence. Basquiat was drawing pictures and putting them on the side of the road. They're way more valuable now than they were even when he was alive. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying he wasn't making money, because, you know, he had a lot of reputable people supporting him and backing him. But I feel like bringing that argument up, especially in an environment like what's happening now, can be very counterproductive to artists who need the construction of, hey, like if you, for example, if you don't want to be on Spotify, that's great because you have other means of income. Like you said, you're making more with DistroKid. I have the same thing. I did several brand deals with DistroKid last year and in 2020. And it's like, or from 2020 to last year, we made more off the brand deals than we ever did off of the streaming for the artists. But it's because the artists had bigger social followings than they had streaming numbers. So right now it's an intention economy. And I think it's more productive to talk about like the whole picture, which is why you can have the ability to say, hey, I'm going to take my music off of streaming because you have YouTube, because you have built a fan base, because you have an understanding of how to create revenue around your music, which is why, again, I believe that music is a lost leader. You've created something that brought the attention to you. And now that you have the attention, you're able to make more money. I think putting this out to most artists who haven't even amassed any type of revenue generation system on a consistent consistent basis is a sticky place to be, because then they jump on the bandwagon that, yeah, F streaming, it's ineffective. And then they never learn how to be effective. They just learn how to complain. And they complain on the backs of people who have a platform to say this is not viable or this doesn't work, so they never try. I don't love streaming. I'm like, Dame, I'm not super pro streaming, but I think it's part of the overall algorithmic play to draw attention to the brands that I'm building. And as I'm building those brands, I'm able to say, hey, this is how we generate revenue here, 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 and here. And I do think that some people don't have social skills, but I also think he mentioned Nick D. Nick D is a phenomenal performer. He has an incredible podcast. He can teach you just as much as he can rap. You know what I'm saying? But I think the point that I was making a while ago is that I still see that it's not the algorithm, but the world is still electing to reward people who don't look like me when it comes to everything around, you know what I'm saying? So I think as a responsible executive, I do have to encourage Black and brown people. Don't just complain about Spotify. It's never going to work for you. These things are never going to work for you if you don't try. But if you don't try something, you'll never be able to pivot into what works. I know that I don't have the same benefits of a Nick D. I've been in his circles before. I know a lot of people who work around him. Dude is a complete outlier. I will never take away the work that he's done, because he's done a ton of work. But I also know I have somebody who has a similar output, similar backing, and is not seeing the same results. So I can't say if you just put in the work, it's going to equal the same result. Do you know what I'm saying? So I do want to give some concessions, but I have to Basquiat is one of my favorite artists, and I've spent a lot of time studying him.
Sure.
And I just think it's almost like, I won't call it a straw man argument, but it starts to feel that way a little bit when you bring him up, because he wouldn't be in the digital age. Same way that Kanye doesn't have to post. Kanye doesn't have to post because he was a genius before we got to this posting era. But Kanye did have to go bang on doors and do bullshit that he didn't want to do. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's at every facet of the music industry, at every given moment, there's shit that you don't want to do. There's what's going on. There's the economy that you're fighting against, of basically what are consumers wanting, what is the business model wanting, and then what's the role of art in this? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think you make a valid point. I'm glad that you brought that up specifically for Basquiat, but it's bigger than Basquiat. For me, this is about high art. This is about fine art. This is about having the opportunity to position your art for a higher ticket. When I see a video recently where Timbaland and 2 Chainz go to a vinyl that's being sold for $5,000 and people are fighting over it, that makes me excited. Not because vinyls are coming back, even though vinyls are selling out CDs for the first time since 1987. It's not about that. For me, it's about fine art and the emphasis on popcorn art, the emphasis on microwave art. And now you got artists, young artists, Black and brown young artists, who are voluntarily making bullshit purposely to try to game this system.
But is that more about the consumer, though? Do you know what I'm saying?
The consumer. And I say that respectfully.
You're saying that as somebody who streams, though.
Can I say this? Can I say this real quick? This is real quick. Erinn, I got love for you. I'm going to say this, though. When I say F the consumer, I think that artists have been sitting out here tap dancing for casual fans and forgot about the people who actually invested money into what they do. And this is my emphasis. Instead of focusing on, well, I could get billions and billions of listeners, fam, you may never do arena tours. Not talking to you, Erinn, just the person I'm talking to right now. You may never do arena tours. Are you okay with making minimum wage with your art form? Would that feel like a failure to you? If not, there's a game plan to get there, and it doesn't need a lot of the things people say that you need. But you wouldn't know that if you're always following what other people are telling you need for your career. So the Basquiat example is not about Basquiat. It's about fine art and having the ability to position something that it feels like many different structures are trying to make you believe is 0.0003 cents. And just in general, it's not really as valuable as it once was. To who? Especially when we buy for 2 different decisions as human beings. One, we buy to avoid pain. The other one is to attract pleasure. The only 2 reasons we buy anything. So if somebody comes to my show last week, somebody who owns all of my CDs said, "What you got, Curtis?" "Bro, I got this USB drive." He said, "What's on it?" "All the music you already got, plus a few behind the scenes videos and some other stuff." "How much is it?" $20. "I'm going to give you 45. Had I only been concerned about the streaming, maybe I still would have got that after a certain point in time. But the point that I'm making is that that community lasts forever. That interaction lasts forever. I have the data that Dame was talking about with that. Second thing, everybody has these it's okay arguments for artists, but not one person watching this who got a 9 to 5. You would not take your ass to work tomorrow if they told you, you know what? Instead of this monthly payment, instead of this hourly payment, we're going to go to a micro payment system, and we're only going to give the most amount of money to those of you that make the most sales. And then after that, everybody else, you just kind of have to still come to work if you want to keep your job, and you still got to learn the algorithm. I don't like the conversations that are being had. Yes, the Basquiat can be a straw man argument, but it's not about Basquiat. It's about limiting the greatest version of art. We're not going to be broke in this era. As DIYers, we're not going to be broke. I refuse. Making money is our moral obligation to support our art form, ourselves, and our family. This is a big mission statement of DIY. I don't agree with the starving artist. I think the idea of the starving artist was made by some kind of executive or somebody who was making money off of an artist. I do not believe in that. So when I say the highest level of art, I'm talking about the highest level of creativity, but also being paid top dollar for that as well. I just use Basquiat as an entry into giving a perspective and saying, okay, in this space, how would fine art be treated? He'd be told to go stream because of all the opportunities he could have.